Where were you on June 13th, 2023? Did you learn about it on your phone? Were you watching it on TV or the internet? Did it feel larger or perhaps less exciting than you thought it might? Because if you have lived in America with a pulse or an interest in the news for the last 6+ years, you have certainly discussed, positively, negatively, or in speculation, hypothetically, whether Donald Trump would get in trouble for all the things he seemed to do and maybe get away with. And would he ever be arrested, booked, arraigned? And not just by maybe some random process that who knows where it leads, but by the big guns. The reason that they say don't make a federal case out of it is that if it's a federal case, it's already a big deal, even if you are, yes, legally presumed innocent, as he and all defendants are. So where were you today when it actually happened, when Donald Trump was arraigned, when he pled not guilty to 37 counts, when that formal processing and that historic indictment news played out, building on what he first tried to leak to get momentarily ahead of it Thursday night, what was unsealed on Friday, what we have been tracking from either 6 years ago or the last few days until now.
This unprecedented day.
A historic journey for the former president.
Placed under arrest on charges brought by the government he once led.
On 37 counts related to the alleged mishandling of classified documents. The former president called this, quote, one of the saddest days in the history of our country.
You can sense this anticipation.
A circus-like atmosphere. Both Donald Trump and Walt Nauta have been booked inside that federal courthouse.
This is someone who's charged with federal crimes, which could send him to prison. This is not a day of celebration.
He has pled not guilty.
Mr. Trump sat stone-faced, arms tightly folded across his chest.
The historic federal indictment of a former president of the United States.
This is one of those times where you think about where you get your information, your news, your facts. Who are you living it with together? We showed you that side by side of something that is not normal. Donald Trump, now booked and arraigned in 2 separate jurisdictions in the span of just over 2 months. Not normal. Not a good thing for him. Is it good for the country? Can we handle it? We did in New York. Days after that, everyone moved on. And here tonight, we lived through this. And for perspective, as promised, we turn to our colleague and someone who has brought you so many big news stories over so many years here at MSNBC, Lawrence O'Donnell, host of The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. Thanks for making time today.
Ari, I haven't been in the studio since before COVID. It's been years, and I ran out of these, so
please
I'm coming back to get an Ari pen. You know, your question of where were you when this happened, I get it, but I have a strong feeling that a month from now, a year from now, people's answer to that is going to be, I don't know, I don't remember. You know, because it should be a really gigantic, momentous, historic feeling that people are having. But the notion that Donald Trump could break laws, I think, was built into more than half of the voting population before he was elected president, right? And the Trump side of it, you can see, is pretty unmoved by it. You know, when he announced his first indictment, which he was off by a week when he predicted when it would happen in Manhattan, he summoned people to Manhattan. He sent out the January 6th summons, everybody come, you know, and they didn't. They didn't. And he saw that they didn't. I came, I walked down there that morning and found this very peaceable crowd, a little, you know, certain amount of chanting, but, you know, very, very peaceable. I walked among all the Trump supporters who were there. None of them bothered me. Same thing today in Florida. Now, Florida, you know, has even more available Trump voters to that, you know, spot. Although, let's remember, Manhattan had 68,000 Trump voters, okay? 68,000. About 50 of them, 75 of them showed up in Manhattan. So what you're seeing is on both sides, there's a kind of built-in, it's not momentous. Even the people who are out there protesting, you know, Donald Trump being arrested again today, it's such a small group. Their energy is so low that they were kind of ready for it. You know what I mean? Like they're not shocked. They're not bumped.
Well, when you say that, it's interesting because we had an analyst on here, Ebro Darden, who's in radio, and he said, you know, he's so tired of hearing politicians say this is not who we are when it comes to problems, and this is who we are. And so you're reminding us that for Donald Trump, It is more of a feature than a bug that lying to the feds, covering things up, obstructing, this is who he is.
Yeah, but it's worth pausing over us imagining, say, 2014, okay, before there's a whiff of Donald Trump running for president. If in 2014, a fairly short time ago, if you said there's going to be a headline with espionage charges and former president of the United States, you would say then, well, that's going to be the biggest thing in American history.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to it, because of all of this behavior in the meantime, right, and the public firing of Comey, all those things, starting really early on, there's just no surprise level to it now.
Are you suggesting that our personalities are now the boiled frog? And it just happens slowly.
So Daniel Patrick Moynihan coined the phrase "defining deviancy down," and this is a perfect example of that, where over time we lower our bar for what we think deviance is. And it used to be something like this was. By the way, it is highly deviant. Okay, for a former president to be charged with crimes couldn't be more deviant. It's never happened before. But Donald Trump, has defined deviancy down so much among us that we certainly are not shocked by it. And so it represents a challenge, right? It represents a challenge for us in the way we present it, and it represents a challenge to the country because of this period of defining deviancy down being a central principle of Donald Trump's behavior. How do we hold on to the importance of what this is? I mean, there are going to be people who don't follow much of this, who stumble across this kind of TV today and go, "Oh, there they go again. They're doing that again."
Right.
As if this is an extension of something else we've done before. When no, it isn't. This is brand new, and so there's a real communicative challenge that we all have about the seriousness of this, about the historic significance of it, and it's not a challenge easy to meet because of the way it all unfolds.
Well, that goes to something I wanted to show you for your reaction, because the danger is not defined by people like me and you who are just observers, and it's not defined by Donald Trump's critics. The danger, which is why we have these laws, was defined by the people in the national security community who create and erect and maintain these intelligence standards. And there can be overclassification, there can be debates. But in the main, the idea is we have to protect things so people don't get killed unnecessarily. And some of the people who say that and do that are the people who actually risk their darn lives. That's the source, it's not the critics. And then the evidence of how important it is to sound like you agree with that comes from Donald Trump himself. So I'm going to show you something that we made. Partly it's from Donald Trump, it's his words. Partly it's from Jack Smith. The parts of this that are evidence in this case, Donald Trump's words now as criminal evidence, are stamped. And part of it is what we also pulled. And this is now part of why he has a problem in court, because he said or claimed or pretended to care about the laws he's now accused of breaking.
Hillary is likely to be under investigation for many years. I'm going to enforce all laws concerning the protection of classified information. We also need the best protection of classified information. We could very well have a sitting president under felony indictment and ultimately a criminal trial.
So the striking thing is he's reading every one of those statements off a teleprompter. You'll notice that they're actually clear English. That those are not Trump sentences that are just a blather of words. So he's reading them off a prompter. And as you know, Jack Smith used them in the indictment. He used those words to indicate that Donald Trump knows what the law is. This is not an ignorance of the law case. He can't pretend he thought it was okay. That's why he has those words in there. And so it's using Donald Trump against Donald Trump, which prosecutors apparently are finding pretty easy to do.
Yeah, exactly. And it's that language that could be presented if they get to a jury when he says, I didn't know, as you say.
Well, so here's the thing, right? You have to assume that he cannot testify on the case, right?
I don't think he
Tim
can.
Palatori his former lawyer who you interviewed, I interviewed after you, he said to me on air that he didn't think Donald Trump could possibly testify in his own defense. So let's just assume that's true, that you cannot put Donald Trump on the witness stand in this case. Well, then how do you do it? Like, how you can't get in. What testimony could you get in of what evidence could you get in that Donald Trump thought it was okay? The only way to get that in is he has to get on the witness stand and say, I thought it was okay. And so that's not really going to be available as a defense, without putting you on the stand, which you just can't do.